Welcome to the Neysa Mohammed Show. I'm here today with Maxine Browne. Maxine Browne is a published author and inspirational speaker. She is here today as a survivor of domestic violence. Maxine is here to contribute her story as a means to increase awareness of abuse tactics, recognize the red flags, and how to move forward in rebuilding your life. Maxine has been interviewed on numerous radio and television shows, and now she is here to share her story with us. Please welcome Maxine Browne. Hi, Maxine. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get started. So, Maxine, I would like to hear a little bit about yourself. So, please explain about your background and upbringing. Where did you grow up and what was your family life like?
I'm from an area in Delaware, and my family was an average family, average working family. There was no violence in our home at all. Both my parents were alcoholics, but they were good people, straight shooters, honest, hardworking. They stayed together until their death. So I had no background whatsoever in domestic violence and didn't know really anything about that.
Yes. What was your education like?
I graduated from high school and then I went to college. I majored in Spanish, and in my junior year I lived in Spain as a foreign exchange student and got a degree, and then I was going to go off into the world and make my way.
Nice. Could you tell us a little bit about your previous marriage prior to meeting John?
Yes, I was married for 6 years to someone I met in one of my part-time jobs when I was a college student, actually. And he wound up getting involved in drugs. He became addicted to cocaine, and he began selling cocaine. He had lots of affairs on the side. I had women calling my house, showing up at my door. It was very public. And it also was violent. He would smash things and punch holes in walls and rip phones out of the wall. And the last straw for me was after I had stayed 6 years. Things had gotten increasingly more violent, and he took an axe to my living room furniture and chopped it all up in front of me, and
Wow.
It was terrifying. And I thought, if I live through that, I said, if I live through this, I'm out of here, I'm done. And so I left, and I was alone for 6 years.
So you got yourself out of that abusive relationship?
Yes, and I thought I was doing well. I was very active in my local church. I had purchased a home, and I had a job, and I was doing the best I could as a single mother, raising 2 children, and I thought I had it all together.
Yeah, and you shared children with him, didn't you?
Yes, we had two children. At the time I left, they were ages 3 and 6. And I was raising them on my own, but I thought we were doing well. It was hard, but we were stable, and I thought we were doing pretty well.
So, and how did John come into your life?
Well, I met him through my job. I worked for a Japanese company, and we imported products from overseas, and we had a distributorship network that went from Canada through the United States down into Mexico. And John worked for the Mexican distributorship of this company. And so we were talking over the telephone, but it was all business. But he wanted to become a pen pal with me, and I thought, that would be cool. I'd have a pen pal in Mexico. I wasn't thinking anything. So, okay, that's great. We can write letters together. And that's really how we started to correspond.
And this was during when? This was in like the 1990s?
Yes, this was in like 1992. And we started to write letters back and forth. And then one day I just happened to say in a letter, boy, I've been alone for 6 years and that's fine. I haven't dated and I think I'm ready to go out to dinner with someone. Well, he immediately sent me an 18-page marriage proposal by Federal Express.
Wow.
I know. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was so flattered. I didn't see it as odd. And another thing is, my whole life was based around my faith. And here, John was talking my language. He was saying things like, oh, you know, you are my missing rib, and this was my language from my religion, etc. And so it seemed normal to me. And when you live by faith, sometimes you do things not everyone understands. So I
Right.
thought this was just one of those things, I was stepping out of my comfort zone and I thought everything was okay and I thought this was God leading me into something new. And I always was someone who, from a young age, I thought I was going to be on the mission field. So I was not really surprised that someone from Mexico, who I spoke Spanish, he spoke Spanish, and he proposed marriage. It kind of sounded okay to me.
Yes.
So
Well, I'm sure it occurred like a fairy tale, you
it
know?
did. And it was so flattering. I was so flattered. I didn't see anything bad about it at all. Of course, I wasn't thinking very clearly, I have to admit now. But at the time, it seemed fine.
Yeah, and he was in Mexico and you were in the United States.
Yes.
So,
And
why don't you say a little bit about like what your relationship was like for the courtship? So you got that 18-page letter,
hmm
and what was your response?
well, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. So we were engaged for 9 months. And
Mhm.
again, that seemed like a normal amount of time. 9 months was a nice amount of time. We were talking over the telephone, writing each other letters. It was very romantic. And we would send each other a fax once a week in a letter. And then we would send each other a package by express mail. And it would have a letter, maybe some photographs. And then we would send each other, at the time, technology's changed, but it was a cassette tape of us talking into a tape recorder. So we would hear each other's voice. And when the tape ran out, we were done with the tape and we'd send it by mail. So once a week we got these packages. It was very romantic, very flattering. I thought it was great.
Yeah. So, and then how did you guys come to get married?
Well, after 9 months, he sold everything, came to the United States. I picked him up at the airport, and then we were married 13 days after the airplane landed. And again, it didn't seem odd at the time. I know that sounds crazy today, but at the time, it felt right. It felt romantic. It felt wonderful. I had no idea I was in for trouble.
And you figured you knew him pretty well because you guys had talked so much.
We talked towards the end, we were talking every single day on the telephone for hours. So I didn't feel like he was a stranger, even though we'd never met face to face.
So, and how long were you married to John?
10 years in total.
10 years in total.
hmm
Um, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the power and control wheel. So, what is the power and control wheel in the world of domestic violence? And then, how does your story fit in with the power and control wheel?
The power and control wheel describes an abusive relationship. One person in the relationship tries to control the other person through a series of tactics. And actually, my relationship had everything on the wheel. And so sometimes they use physical violence. Sometimes they use a whole lot of other methods. So one of the tactics, for example, is isolation.
Hmm.
So he cut me off from everyone I knew, from my friends and from my family, and even from my own children. And little by little, he took over, and I couldn't talk to people on the phone. It was inconvenient if I tried to visit someone. It's just not a good day. You know, they don't really like you. They're using you. There would be all these manipulations. And little by little, he got rid of everyone in my life. By the end of 10 years, I had no one except John left in my life. So then there was intimidation. He was scaring me.
Yes.
And he would use all kinds of ways to scare me. He'd destroy my property. He would stand this close to my face screaming at me. There would be lots of things he would do that would scare me. And so when someone scares you, you do what they say. And that's all he wanted. And he controlled the money. He controlled everything.
So was it that you handed off all of the control to him? Like, how did he come to control? Because he went from, somebody who had come into your life to, controlling, various different particles of your life that anybody would have control over their finances, their telephone, their home. So, like, how did he gain control of those aspects of your life?
It came at the beginning. I thought he was just helping because I worked full time. I was a single mom, and he was at home. So when he said, "I'm going to go pick up the mail. Can I have the mailbox key?"
Right.
I never saw the key again for 10 years.
Mm.
I never saw the mail for 10 years. But at the time I handed the key to him, I had no idea that's what was coming. So little by little, so that was the mail. Well, then he started a business. So he wanted to answer the phone for his business. Then it became no one can answer the phone but me. So it was
Now,
like,
did it seem strange to you that, like, he didn't want you to answer the phone? Or was it strange to you and you let it be just the way you let him be just the way that he was about it?
since arguing with him caused such great strife, I tried not to argue. I'm a peaceful person and I don't like conflict. That's, my personality by nature and my weakness also, right? But so I thought, well, I don't want, if it means that much to him, I don't care. You can answer the phone. But I didn't understand that it was part of a pattern of behavior. It was a pattern that he was taking over. I didn't see it that way at the time. I thought I was making a small compromise to keep the peace. I had no idea that over time he took control of absolutely everything. It was kind of like something that, it wasn't like a tsunami. It creeped in like a gradual rising of a riverbed, if you know what I mean. It was gradual.
So first it was, taking the keys to the mailbox, and then it was needing to get cash from the checking account.
Right.
And then it was, needing something else, just ordinary things. But like once he got those things, then he had complete control over all those variables.
Right. And then I never saw them again. And so little by little, that began to have this huge impact. And then, the kids, whether the kids could go somewhere, that was always my decision. Now I had to consult with him. Well, then it became where he was the only one who said anything, and no one even talked to me about anything. And most of the time I didn't even know where the kids were because
And
no
so
one.
what was it like for your kids? Because when you guys first got married, can you say a little bit about what it was like for them? Because like you went from being a single mom in your own home and doing mostly everything yourself to now sharing, a life and a partnership with John. So what was it like for your kids when John came into their lives?
This is the hardest thing to talk about, but I think it was really awful for them. If you can imagine being a normal 11 to 14-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and from one day to the next, there is nobody there but mom. And then there's this guy there, and he's taking over. Now, I had rose-colored glasses on, right? I was not seeing clearly, but the kids didn't have the glasses on.
Mm.
So right away, they knew this guy was bad news. And so they tried to tell me, Mom, he's lying. And I was like, wait a minute. Why would my child lie? Maybe my child is trying to get away with something. I couldn't see why John would lie. I didn't understand that he had an agenda. I missed that piece. I'd never seen manipulation before. So when he would start to create this big thing, and it was all lies, it was all smoke, it was all mirrors, I I just thought he was telling me the truth. And I could understand why a child would lie, because they're by nature they're trying to get their way, but I didn't understand he was trying to take control. So I'm ashamed to say today I believed him, and I didn't believe my children, and they were right, and he was lying.
Was that because he was like taking advantage of the fact that the children were teenagers and he would say things like, teenagers lie to get what they want, or whatever it is that people say about teenagers?
Yes.
You know?
Rebellious, they're disrespectful, they're not listening like they should. Well, that's the typical conversation of any parent with their children, right? They're disrespectful, they're not listening like they should. I told them to do X, they're not doing it. um, I believed him. I had no idea what I was doing.
And then when he would ask them to like do things in the home, did you think it was odd, the amount of, and the just having high expectations? Like, did you think that he had too high of expectations? What did you think of his expectations with the children?
Yes, I thought he had too high expectations. I thought he was being too strict. I thought it was a little ridiculous. He would have them clean the house every single day. I mean, my house was never vacuumed daily. Once a week was like what we did, right? Why did it need to be vacuumed all of a sudden 7 days a week? Things like that. I never agreed with it, but again, I was trying to figure out, I did not want to fail this time in my marriage.
Mm.
And I had this guy who was supposedly a minister. I went from a drug addict to a minister, and I thought, how can I blow this? I have to make this work. And I thought if I just tried harder, or if I compromised more, or if I just, I'll let this one ride, you pick your battles. And so that was the way I was thinking. It wasn't a good idea, but that's where my head was going at the time.
So you really wanted your marriage to work?
Absolutely. I was committed. I had bet the farm, so to speak. I gave everything. But that's the way marriage is, and I always knew life was not easy, and marriage is not easy, and you have good days and bad days. So when I would have bad days, I was just thinking, all right, this is just a bad day.
Right.
Tough it out. Buck up, little camper.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
And when did you start to notice, that when did you start to notice that things were really off? And why did you stay? Like, when you noticed like things were really off, and it's like clear to you in your mind that you're sitting there asking yourself the question, why am I staying? But you stay,
I think there's like a gradual erosion of who you are. I think I'm an intelligent person. I think I have a lot on the ball. But little by little, he had silenced me. So if you've never been silenced before, it's a little bit hard to describe. It's like little by little, people stopped asking my opinion. I had been told to shut up so many times I can't even count them. So I got used to being silent. No one cared what I thought, so I stopped speaking. It's a little hard to communicate that, but that's part of what happened. I became less confident in my own opinion because he would play mind games and manipulation so well that I didn't trust myself anymore. And
And
so,
use your faith against you, because I'm sure because you were felt so strongly tied to your faith, he would like quote things and
yeah,
and, and use them against you. Is that
absolutely. And so, you know, one of the scriptures is the man is the head of the house in all things. So he would stress in all things. Now the Bible says a lot of other things too. We submit to one another and we respect one another. But he would only talk about in all things. The woman is to submit. The man is the head. And so, since that was stressed so heavily, I forgot that God loves all of us equally, men and women. And when I forgot that, and when I forgot that we're to respect one another, not just woman, you must respect man, I got lost in what he said. And he would also, when he thought I was being disobedient, he would make me read this book that we had at home over and over again about the submission of the woman to a man. And it was very,
was this a faith book? What kind of book was this?
it was a fundamental Christian book. It was probably written in the 1940s or 50s. It was an oldie, but a goodie, you know. But anyway, so he would make me read it. When I finished it, he would hand it back to me, read it again, read it again, read it again, you know, kind of a thing. So I was forced to read this book over and over and over and over again. And he would even snatch the Bible out of my hands. I wasn't allowed to read the Bible, only when he let me read the Bible, which anybody, you know, that doesn't even make sense. But anyway, that's the way it was. So it was a brainwashing. Can I say that? It was kind of a brainwashing. So I'm self-confident today for the most part. I think I'm smart, but there was an eroding of who I was to such an extent that I was not thinking very clearly. And I was making decisions based on lies more than based on, you know, what you would make a decision based on. You know, I had lost myself in the sauce.
Mm. Could you like feel yourself disappearing?
Yes, yes, I did.
It's
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
yeah, I got kind of erased. And that was one thing with this divorce. You know, my first divorce, I didn't mind keeping that man's name. I was fine with that. It matched the names of my children. It was fine, no problem. This time, there was a screaming from deep in my soul, I want my name back. I had to have my name back because he erased me as a person. And I went back to my maiden name. It was like I was trying to find my own identity again. It was a struggle to do that.
So, I just want to give people a sense of how the abuse showed up. So, I'd like you to talk about, in the book, you describe an incident with a flute. Could you
Oh,
describe that incident with the flute?
we'd been fighting on and off for days. I can't remember what it was about. It doesn't matter. And I was at work, and he called me on the phone, and he told me he was going to destroy my flute. Now, this wasn't like a cheap thing. This was a professional, solid silver Gemeinhardt with open French holes. I mean, it was an expensive instrument. Um, and it's what a professional musician would have used.
And it was
So,
something that you loved.
pardon?
It was something that you loved.
Yes, I had carried this thing around the world with me, and I'd taken very good care of it. I'd had it for many years. And so he took this instrument and he took a hammer to it and he flattened the entire instrument flat as a pancake from one end to the other. And I came home from work and I walked in the door and he says, "Here," and he shoved it at me. And I immediately walked to the phone and called 911. I'd been praying on my way home.
Mm.
He's not beating me. He's not hitting me, but this doesn't feel right. Is this abuse? And I was praying. I said, God, you know, I'm a little dense sometimes. Get me something. Give me something that's so black and white I can't miss it. Is this an abusive relationship? And I walked in the door to find my flute smashed with a hammer, and it was black and white, and then I could call 911. You know, all I needed was something that crystal clear, and I could take action. So I had him arrested. I pressed charges, and he went through an anger management class, and I don't know that anything was helped by that, but I at least took the steps that were available to me through the law, and I took action.
So why don't you think the anger management classes, why didn't they work? You know, why did the police procedures work? So I'm sure there were times when you reached out for help, you know? And like why didn't it work? Like why didn't it work when you filed the charges and then he was sent to the classes? Like how come that didn't have an impact on the quality of your life?
You know, domestic violence is not about anger. An abuser is not really mad when he destroys things and when he punches the wall, when he throws the lamp across the room. He's not angry. He is doing a pattern of behavior to scare you. He's not mad. So an anger management class doesn't change anything, because the real problem is a fundamental belief system that believes that a woman is a possession of a man and she has no right to a voice or a personality or anything else. She is like a Barbie doll that he bought. And he has a right to do anything he wants to the Barbie doll, because she is just a thing that he owns, like a couch.
So it's like the procedures that they have, that they put in place, are not the right fit, you know? 'Cause you're
No.
not dealing with somebody who's angry. You're dealing with somebody who has um, um,
It's a
ethics.
belief systems. It's a whole belief system that your intimate partner becomes your possession. So it doesn't really matter if the abuser is female or male. It's the same belief system. Once you have an intimate partner, that person is a thing that you own. And of course, that's not true.
So much of your interaction with him, you felt like an object.
Yes, absolutely.
So how did he use your children against you?
The children were used to control me. He never cared about them at all. If he thought he would get something out of being nice to them, he was nice to them. If he was tired of dealing with them, he, you know, tossed them into the street. You want to go hang out with druggy X? Hey, goodbye, go away. They were actually, when they got permission to go out, they weren't allowed to come home early. Can you imagine that? So if he, you know, it was because he didn't want them there. And then he controlled what they did, when they could come, when they could go. All right, you left, then stay gone. I don't care what, you know, it went from he's calling, you know, you have to call in every 15 minutes, to it became, I don't want you home until 11 o'clock. Don't you dare come home 5 minutes early.
Okay.
Right, so it changed.
So was
I don't
that
know.
better? Was that better for your children to be out of
No.
the house and not be around it? I mean, what kind of impact did it have on your children? You know, like not to really know where their place was in the household. You know, it
Have
was
you
kind of
ever
yo-yoing back and forth.
Have you ever had friends, or can you remember talking to friends who now are adults looking back on childhood? And those friends who had parents who were always saying, you have to be in by curfew. Who are you going to be with? And where are you going? And what are you doing? Those children always knew that their parents cared about them.
Hmm.
You had the other set of friends who they didn't care when they came home. That kid didn't know anyone loved them. So the message my children were getting was, nobody cares about you. Get out and stay away. Go away and don't bother me. It's not a good message.
And did your children stay with you in your home for most of their life? Like, at what point did your children leave the
Um,
house completely?
it John began to be more and more abusive over time. The punishments for minor infractions got to be insane, right? They would be locked in the basement and forced to mop up water in this
Oh my
wet,
gosh.
dark basement that always took in water. That we lived in a low-lying area that should never have had a basement, so that basement was never going to be dry no matter what we did. And so
And
he
they
would
lived down there in the basement?
they didn't live down there, but they were forced to go down there, say on a Saturday for a punishment of some kind. They'd have to go down after breakfast. They could come up to go to the bathroom, and then they'd have to go back down. And then maybe they could come up to eat lunch, and then they had to go back down. And they were just pushing this water around on a wet floor. It was like if somebody told you to go into the desert and clean up that sand. You
You'd never be able to clean up the sand.
That's what I'm saying. It was
Impossible chore.
it was an impossible task with no purpose, with no future. It was just, I mean, why? He was trying to break their spirit. That's what it was about. He was humiliating them. That's what it was about. It wasn't about discipline. It wasn't about work ethic. It was about humiliation. It was about disempowerment. And that's what he was doing. He was breaking their spirit. And so it went from that to then there were all kinds of punishments. And then one of the ones, he started to beat one of my daughters with a piece of wood. And he would make every family member stand and watch while he did this. And I don't know, because my memory is really bad because of the trauma. But I don't know how long that went on. And finally I said to him, "You'll never touch her again." And that was the last
And
time.
how did you make that happen?
I don't even know. I remember the room we were in, we'd gone back to the bedroom. I wish I'd said it in front of my daughter. I didn't. We were in the bedroom alone, and I just said to him, "You will never touch her again. I don't care. I don't care what's going on. You'll never touch her again." It just was, it was, there are no words. I have no words.
Hmm.
So anyway, that ended. But during that process, my daughter began to have an emotional breakdown, and because of the abuse. She was being verbally abused. The verbal abuse in our house was something I have never heard in any movie I've ever seen of any kind. Those kinds of words and language used in a family. I've never heard this kind of talk before, ever. I mean, I'm not talking about an occasional F-bomb, I'm talking about just the insults and the humiliation, the degradation of one family member to another. I've never heard these words spoken, and I was not raised like that. And we got mad at each other in my house. Maybe you'd stomp off and cool down for an hour or two and then come back and talk about it, but we never insulted each other. So there was this extreme emotional and psychological abuse on top of the physical abuse, and this one daughter started to just fall apart. And my kids
How old
struggled
was she?
in 14, 15.
Hmm.
Maybe even the mental breakdown started at 13. But she started to have, I think she was terribly depressed. The doctors gave her Ritalin to help her focus in school because she was struggling in school. She was not hyperactive. She didn't need Ritalin. Uh,
Was she diagnosed with attention deficit disorder?
that's why they give Ritalin. I don't know. Nobody asked the right questions. I mean, no one was listening to her. No one asked any questions. I don't know. But then she couldn't sleep at night, so they gave her pills for insomnia. She had chronic migraines because of the stress she was under, and they gave her pills for chronic migraines. But really, the problem was she had a monster living in her home, and our problem was domestic violence. Our problem was not that my daughter was crazy, and they misdiagnosed her with everything under the sun. The only thing I believe was true was she had post-traumatic stress disorder from the trauma of the abuse. I believe that was true. But they diagnosed her with bipolar. I don't believe she's bipolar. You cannot be traumatized as a child the way she was traumatized and it not have an impact.
Yes.
So that's what was really going on. So after that, I thought, I've got to get this child out of the house. She's going to make a mistake so big because she started to get in trouble with the law. She started acting out. She started climbing out of her window at night and breaking into local businesses. I mean, just criminal mischief, but nothing serious. But I know my daughter is a mother, and I could see my two children conspiring. And we slept with this huge bolt on our door. You'd probably put that bolt on a barn door, and it was on our bedroom door because we were afraid they would come in the night and kill us. So actually,
you were afraid that John would come into the night?
John and I were afraid my two children were going to break our bedroom door open in the middle of the night and kill us. That's how bad the environment was in our home. It was crazy.
Seems
and actually,
so strange. Like, why would you lock yourself out of your children's, like, lock yourself in your bedroom, from your children?
I think it was because the abuse from John in the household was so extreme that we knew we were in danger. And actually, the children confessed to me they had been talking about it. And actually, they'd been looking for someone in the community who could take John out. And I knew my oldest daughter would never do it. She'd just talk about it. But I knew my younger daughter, she's a strong person, very strong. And I thought, her sister will talk, the younger one will act. And her life would be destroyed. I mean, not only, I didn't want my husband killed, but my daughter's life would have been destroyed. So I thought, I've got to get her out of the house. So I had her move in with my mother, and she stayed there for about a year.
Okay. And at that point, did you still think that you were trying to make your marriage work? Or was it more like you were just trying to survive day to day?
I think he kept me so busy, I was trying to survive day to day. And I was completely committed to the marriage. He was a minister. We started, during those years, I was working a full-time job. We started a ministry, and we started a business. So we had a business startup, a ministry startup, plus my full-time job, plus my kids. I don't know how to communicate how busy I was, but I rarely had time to think. If
What
I'd had
did
more,
other people think? I mean, I'm sure that other people saw little signs here and there. Like, did they come to you? Did they have an opinion about it? Did they try to? So what was the community around you, the very limited community that you had? What sort of things were they saying to you about
only
John or about your situation? Or did they like John? Was it all, did John put up a front?
he looked pretty good if you only knew him a few times. Like, he seemed very charming if you only met him once or twice with a little bit of contact. But the more contact you had, people would automatically recognize something was wrong and they would back up. I saw that pattern play out over and over again, but no one ever came to me and said, hey, this guy's weird. Or, I mean, it wasn't like that. It was just be like, we'd meet new people and then they would back up. But the people I knew before I met him, some of them, John made me call them on the phone and say, don't ever call me again. I never want to speak to you again. And these are people who never did anything to me. People who loved me, very nice people. but it was part of the taking control, isolating me. These are things that I had to do to get through that day, and to keep the peace in my home, and to try and make this marriage work, and yada, yada, yada. And so I just did what I was told. And it wasn't nice and it wasn't pretty. I'm embarrassed to say, but that's what I did, and I did that.
Um, what were the red flags?
Well,
When you look back now, right? Like, you can see more clearly what the red flags were.
I had
So, what
I
were the
had so
early
many.
signs, that have people say, I don't know, something's not right here?
I had several, like from the very beginning. One was, for example, I told him he had let me know that his divorce had not gone through, that there was a little glitch of some kind, and this was before he ever came. And I was talking to a girlfriend, and I told her that. She said, he's got to clean up his stuff before he comes. And I thought, well, that's good advice. So I told him over in a telephone call, you can't come until your divorce is final. You know, he had such a meltdown. I mean, crying, hysterical meltdown, crying so hard he could barely breathe or speak. And that right there, I should have noticed that.
Like a tantrum.
It
Like,
was a tantrum. It was absolutely a tantrum of a young,
reaction from an adult man.
right, who acts like that, right? And if they do act like that, I don't want to be with somebody like that. But, I excused it, poo-pooed it. Okay, well, he was having a bad day, whatever. I ignored it. But that was a red flag. In the first year, he didn't get his way on something, and he locked himself in the bathroom and said he was going to kill himself. Again, that's not normal, average, healthy behavior.
I don't think so.
No. The first time he called me names or called my children names, these are my children, that's a deal breaker. I mean, today I wouldn't tolerate that. What was the matter with me? I I don't even know. Um, so, there are lots of things I could go on for days and days about all the things today I see clearly that if it presented itself today in a new relationship, I would tell him whatever I had to tell him, that's not acceptable. Is Stalking is so dangerous.
Yeah,
And
could you share about the incident when you were out walking? You were taking your children just for a walk outside around the block.
yeah, I was just going to take a walk around the block. I had a baby in a stroller and two young teenagers, and we were just going to go for a walk so we could talk. No big deal, right? And I catch him out of the corner of my eye. I catch sight of his car, and we ducked behind some trees, and we were watching. And this man was going around the blocks and around the blocks trying to find us. We'd only been gone about 10 minutes. I mean, what was that about? He had to know where I was every second. That's crazy behavior. That's not normal. Um, and when I was at work, he would call me over and over and over again. Where's the cereal? I'm coming over for lunch. Every day, every day. He called me all day long. Now, normal behavior from a romantic partner is maybe they'll call you at lunchtime. Thinking about you, baby. Miss you.
Right.
That's normal once. Not calling you all day long. That's not normal. That's more of a stalking kind of behavior. So there were lots and lots and lots of red flags that I ignored or just pushed them away, or I made excuses for him that today I clearly see it. And that's the main thing I teach on, because I want other people to see the red flags so they don't do what I did, or they get out earlier if I had left in the first year instead of the 10th year, my children would not have been destroyed.
Mhm.
And I'm responsible for that. I can't change it today.
Maxine, what do you want women who are in similar situations to know? Like what do you wish you had known? What do you wish you had access to,
You know,
early on?
when you're going through something like that, you think you're completely alone. You think you're the only one. And did you know that one of the statistics is that 1 in every 4 women at some point will go through an abusive relationship, and that 3 in 4 Americans know a victim of domestic violence. So this is so common, it's all around us, but many people don't recognize the signs and don't realize how common it is. So when that woman is going through this hard place with her mate, or a man with their mate, they're thinking, I'm the only one. No one knows. And if they'll just begin to talk about it, they might be surprised how common it is, and that there are people all around them who can help them. And then there are resources. If you call the hotline, the domestic violence hotline in your area, you can tell them what's going on for you. And because the resources change all the time, they don't want to put it in writing what's there, but they will let you know what is available that would help you with your specific situation. So that's your first thing, is to call the hotline and tell them your situation, and they can assess what's available and what might be a good fit for you. And they can talk to you about how can we increase your safety today.
Well, you know, much of your story is about like he controlled every aspect of your life. So he controlled like whether or not you use the telephone. So like how would somebody who's experiencing this right now get access to using something like the telephone?
Um, Perhaps they could use a neighbor's phone just to begin with. Maybe the domestic violence shelter in their area could give them a mobile number or a cell phone. Sometimes they have cell phones for domestic violence survivors that she could hide somewhere. Um, you would have to see what is available. You have to be careful with the internet because of the history that it leaves behind, right? And if they're a tech-savvy person, they'll know how to go on the internet history and see what websites you've accessed. So you have to be kind of aware, but the public library has computers that possibly you could use that would be a safer place to go. And you could say, I'm going to the library.
Mm-hmm.
While you're
I'm
there,
going
use the
to the park
computer.
that's near the library or something like that.
Exactly.
So, what do you see is key in terms of impacting the awareness of domestic violence?
I'd like to see more television commercials, just 1 minute television commercials, um, saying something, we need to respect each other. Everyone needs to respect everyone, or something, something that's generally accessible to the public. I know the little group I participate in my local area, we have resource tables at the local community fairs, and we'll just be there. And so we're trying to keep domestic violence in the conversation. Another thing we do is we have library displays where in the bookcase at the library we'll have domestic violence books and posters up. Or we will do public awareness events where we're talking about the power and control wheel. What does an abusive relationship look like? How would you recognize it? I'd like to see more programs in the schools, and I'm working on actually a workbook right now. I'm calling it Tools for Schools, and I would like a program in the schools so that if the greatest at-risk population for domestic violence is ages 16 to 24. So they have no dating history, no love relationship history. It might be their first romance, and they get one of these crazy partners, and they don't know what they're dealing with, right? So if they had had this class in health class, What does an abusive relationship look like? What does healthy behavior look like? Then they have some point of comparison to like go, oh, is this okay? If I had had a class like that, I would not have stayed for 10 years. I would have seen the signs and gotten out, but I didn't
Yeah, or
know.
even a class on like how to have healthy relationships. Like what is a healthy
Yeah,
relationship? Even in a friendship, with
yeah,
somebody, what is a healthy relationship?
yeah.
So,
It's not okay. It's not okay for your girlfriend to go through your Facebook account and check your address. I mean, go through your emails. That's an invasion of your privacy. Things like that. These are things that abusers do. Um, so yes, we could call it healthy relationships, but the whole time I'm going to be talking about the power and control wheel. I might disguise it a little bit, but I'm going to be talking about the power and control wheel, and so that people can recognize what's okay and what's not okay, and then if it's not okay, what do you do about that? And then if you are a bystander and around you see someone abusing someone, what could you say to confront that behavior? Because as a society, we are our brother's keeper. What are we going to do? Just stand there and let that happen in front of us? Or can we call that person aside in private and say, that joke wasn't very funny, really? It bothered me. Or, that's not okay. Are you sure you want to treat your girlfriend like that? But we all need a class on that. What could we say that would be at least somewhat confronting, and saying that's not all right. And if all of us are doing that, this won't continue. But it's going to take everyone working together. This is not a women's issue. This is a societal issue, and abuse is not okay. I don't care who's doing it to who.
and
To
any
me,
kind of abuse. I mean, even verbal abuse is abuse.
absolutely.
So, how did you get out of your situation? Like, how did you restore, not only get out of your situation in your marriage, divorcing John, but like, how did you get yourself back to a healthier version of you? Because leaving that situation, I'm sure you were very damaged in a lot of ways. And like, how do you deal with your woundedness?
When I came out, at the time I came out, I was severely depressed. Well, actually, as soon as I got out, I felt much better. I was having a lot, I was having migraines all the time. When I got out, they mysteriously disappeared with no medication required, thank you very much, because it was stress related. So some of those things immediately were better because I now was in a different space. But then I had so much chaos in here and in here, and so much pain and repressed memories. Actually, I didn't remember a lot of things that happened. I had years worth of blank. Um, and when I got out and I got in a safe place, I started having repressed memories coming up in like pieces, and it would just like fireworks, if you can just imagine fireworks of little clips of a picture of something that happened. And I thought I was crazy. I went to counseling, and I told the counselor what was happening, and this person said, this is normal, that once you get safe again, that your brain starts to bring you some of the memories that they had been locked in a filing cabinet until you were safe enough, and then a piece would come back at a time. If it opened everything at once, you couldn't handle it. It would be too much for you. So your brain knows that and only gives you little pieces. And so with the little pieces, and then with stories my family told, I started to put my past back together again. What happened to me? What happened? Did that, I would have a memory and I was thinking, oh, that's not true. And then I'd realize, no, that did happen. And it came back a little at a time. And so I made a commitment to rebuild my relationships with my family. And so little by little, I rebuilt those relationships. And everyone had gone. I'd been gone for 10 years. I'd been gone out of their lives. And so they had started whole family traditions that I didn't know existed. When I came back on the scene, I started showing up at these things. And I kept expecting at any minute someone to say to me, "What the hell are you doing here? Get out."
Mhm.
You know, because I didn't really feel like I belonged. But I kept showing up and I kept going. And even if I was just standing in a corner smiling, I was there.
Did you feel
And
loved
so
when you came back home?
everyone was nice to me, but there were a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of distance that we had to climb over. But I kept going anyway. And I think, they say that lots of things in life, it's just showing up. That's the first step. You have to show up. If you don't show up, you don't have a prayer. But if you do show up, things get better. So I just kept showing up. And so little by little, I got my relationships back with my family. They're not perfect, but I feel like that was pretty successful considering all we'd been through. And then my friends, I contacted old friends and I apologized to them. And I told them what was happening. And I told them that I was sorry that I hurt them and this is what was happening. And some people forgave me and some people didn't. And that's just the way it is. There's always consequences when you make choices. And I have to live with that. And that's all right. And then I made new friends, and I created a social life, and I got a job, and I bought a home. And, it was like one thing at a time, one day at a time, just rebuilding. And it was hard work, but I think I did okay. I think I did okay. Then, after I was alone for 5 years, and then I met someone. And actually, today I'm happily married. So, and that wasn't easy either because I had a bunch of scar tissue that every time he would say, "Where are you?" I thought he was trying to control me, and he wasn't trying to control anything. He just was, he was asking what your schedule is. So I misinterpreted a lot of things, and I had my baggage. But, we've worked through that. We keep working. And every once in a while, something will come up. And he understands what's happening, and so we keep talking, and it's good. It's good. But he's a great man. I'm very lucky.
That's wonderful. So it's wonderful that you have somebody in your life who's worth having.
Yes. Yes, he's wonderful.
So what would you, are there any resources that you would like to tell us about for, your website? Would you like to tell people about your website or anything specific that you want people to know
Uh,
about?
well, first of all, I'd like to tell you about my stories in Years of Tears. And this is the book that I wrote. And this book is unique for a couple of reasons. One, that my children helped me write the book. They tell their own stories in their own words of what happened to them. And that's unique. I can't even think of any books that are like that. So it's not only my story. My children are telling their story of being abused by their stepfather and the impact that had on their life. Then it is a book not about physical abuse. It is a book about psychological and emotional abuse. That makes it unique because most books are about how he broke my arm or he shot me. Things like that. It's all physical violence. And this is more mental and emotional. And I think the mental and emotional abuse is more common than the physical abuse is very common, unfortunately. But I think this is even more common. And just people don't talk about it. And they have the same question I had as I went through. He's not hitting me. Is this domestic violence? And so I answer that question in this book. Okay? Then my website is dv-recovery.com, And you can reach me by email at Maxine Browne. Now, Brown has an E on the end. If you forget the E, you won't find me, okay? So Maxine Browne at dv-recovery.com. And you can follow me on Twitter. And I talk about domestic violence is all I talk about. I won't talk about the new kinds of shoes you can buy at Macy's. I talk about domestic violence and about mental and emotional abuse. I talk a lot about that. So so you can reach me at Maxine Browne. That is my Twitter account, at Maxine Browne. And I would recommend anyone who's going through this to call the hotline number and talk to someone. You're not alone. You are not alone. This is so common you wouldn't believe it. And there is help for you.
Thank you. Well, I acknowledge you so much for being on the show and sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me,
And it
Neysa.
was wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Bye, guys. See you next time.
Bye.